The Orange Order's ban on members entering Catholic churches has had an impact on a string of politicians here through the years. Back in 1998, David Trimble, who we're talking to on other matters later, faced disciplinary action for attending the funeral of 3 young victims of the Omagh bombing. And he's not the only public figure to have faced censure on the issue. But comments on Talkback yesterday by the Order's Assistant Grand Master Mervyn Gibson have reopened the debate about change. With me now are the Ulster Unionist MLA and Orange Order member Danny Kennedy. Also here is Billy Logan, who's a former Sovereign Grand Master of the Royal Black Institution, and the Reverend Brian Kennaway, who's a former Orange Order chaplain. You're all very welcome to the programme. Thanks for joining us tonight. Danny Kennedy, first of all, you fell foul of this rule 5 years ago when you attended the funeral of Constable Ronan Kerr. Is it, do you think, a throwback to a previous age?
Well, I think there are some in the Orange institution who take a traditional view, and of course they're entitled to that. Ultimately, this is a matter for the Orange institution to consider, debate and take a decision on. I'm not sure that a fully fledged public debate will speed that up. I think rightly the Orange institution will take its time and arrive at what I hope will be a sensible decision.
So you don't think a public debate is a good thing?
Well, I think there's been a public airing of it, but ultimately it is a matter for Grand Lodge.
Sure.
It is a matter for the institution.
But David McNary says very clearly, we heard him on the news just there, saying that Mervyn Gibson's comments actually opens up a very helpful public debate in his view.
And we're having that public debate, but ultimately the decision rests where it rests.
And what is your view? Should the Orange Order be actively considering dropping this rule, in your view?
Well, I mean, in the past, I've attended the funeral services in Roman Catholic churches, both of Ronan Kerr and Stephen Carroll, who were murdered police officers. I've also attended others who were either work colleagues or people who were neighbours and friends, and it was done out of respect and to hopefully give some comfort to families in grief.
So you've ignored the rule in the past?
Well, and I think largely in rural areas there is more tendency for people to overlook the rule, not blatantly overlook it, but simply on a pragmatic basis express sympathy to friends and neighbours.
And you've no regrets whatsoever about doing what you did?
No, I think entirely the right circumstances, particularly the murdered police officers, murdered by Republican terrorists, and I think it was the right thing to do. I also attended, out of interest, the funeral of a political colleague, John Fee,
from the
SDLP,
yeah.
Who was a very fine representative who opposed violence, particularly Republican violence, and who had suffered at the hands and received a very bad beating, and ultimately, very sadly, passed away. And I felt it was the right thing to do to show sympathy.
Billy Logan, do you think that the time has come to change the rule?
Well, I think there's a conflict there. We repeatedly say, civil and religious liberty for all, yet we home in on this rule that prevents members of the Orange Order from attending any form of Catholic worship. And, there's a bit of confusion in the thing. But as far as I'm personally concerned, I mean, I went to a service in Londonderry, in the Cregan. I'll tell you the context of that. I was in the insurance business for 32 years, and on several occasions I was in Derry City. And it so happened I was at Rosemount, which is just off the Strand Road. And a gentleman decided he was going to take my car, and he put a gun in my back and took my motor off me. And the gentleman I was working with, who lived in the Cregan, says to me, "Right, Billy, we're going to get your car." I say, "All I want's the bus to Belfast." He says, "No, we'll have to get your car." And he and his brother and his father, and I finished up in the Provo headquarters for about 3 hours, discussing with these fellas whether I should get my car back or not. And I eventually got my car back through the good offices of this gentleman, his brother and his father.
And you subsequently, when he died, you went to his funeral?
Subsequently, he died a number of years later. And my wife and I went up to the funeral. Now, who's going to criticise me for doing that?
Well, were you criticised for doing that?
Not really.
Right.
Because it was a private matter. I did this in a private capacity.
But you were, of course, and you still are an Orangeman, and you were a very senior figure within the
7-8-year-old.
Right, since 1938, I think you told me.
Yes,
and also
right.
a very senior figure in the Royal Black Preceptory. So you knew you were technically breaking the rules, but
you never gave it a second thought.
You never gave it a second thought. So should the rule be changed?
Well, that's a matter for
Would it be helpful, do you think, if the rule was changed? Because it would clear it up once and for all.
That's a matter for Grand Lodge. That's a body which I haven't...
Would you support it being changed, though, if you were asked your opinion?
I would, yes. But I mean, I've never had the privilege of sitting in Grand Lodge. You know, I've never aspired to that. The other organisation to which I belong, yes, I have great love for that too. But my membership of the Orange Order is there and will be there till they carry me out.
Brian Kennermay, do you think the time has come for change? Because it is, of course, the case that all members of the Order, when they're joining, know that the rule is there and they still go ahead and sign on the dotted line.
Well, the rule is confusing, could I say?
Well, is it confusing?
It is very confusing. And the question is whether or not you're actually condoning Catholic worship by your presence.
So tell us what you think is confusing about the rule.
What is confusing is, are you actually condoning it by your presence? Because you're asked not to give any countenance by your presence. Are you giving countenance? According to a QC's ruling in the 60s, in the Phelim O'Neill case, you're not. Indeed, more recently in Grand Lodge, the present Grand Secretary, in relation to another matter, made it quite clear, and it's quoted in the report book, when he said, he clarified that mere attendance at a meeting would not necessarily be judged as participation.
But it is, and I should
So
say, we did ask for a representative of the Orange Order to join us on the programme tonight, and we were told nobody is available. It's an internal matter, we were told, for the institution.
Yes, but it is something of a different era.
Yeah, but the point is the vast majority of people interpret it as you shouldn't enter a Catholic church, you shouldn't attend a Catholic service. That's where the confusion comes in. So changing it, I suppose, arguably, would clarify it once and for all.
Yes.
Is that your view?
Yes, it is. But it's a product of its time. And its time was, of course, when, as we saw in the past, when the President of Ireland died, government ministers couldn't attend his funeral because the Catholic Church said you can't attend a Protestant service of worship. They had to sit outside the church. The Rule 21 of GAA, that has been changed. So I think if the Catholic Church have courageously changed their rule, GAA have changed theirs, I think logically the time is past for the Orange Order to change.
Well,
but I don't think a public debate's going to help it, actually.
You don't think a public debate's going to help? OK, do you think that will make the Orange Order clam up
I think it'll make it more difficult.
and decide not to consider
I think
this?
it'll make it more difficult.
So is there a groundswell of opinion for change or not, do you think? Rank and file Orange members, do you think they...
Rank and file are certainly, yes, but Grand Lodge is a different body.
Right. Is that how you see it, Danny Kennedy? Do you think that the public discussion may, in fact, knock on the head any short-term chance of change for those who want to see change?
Well, I think it will not be changed at the behest of the BBC.
Well, I don't think the BBC is asking for it to be changed. We're discussing it.
No, and I'm not suggesting that, but I'm simply saying that...
I mean, it was started by Mervyn Gibson. It wasn't started by the media.
But the Orange Order will take its own time to consider the issue, and it'll come up through the grassroots and eventually land at Grand Lodge. And those are the processes by which any change will come.
But if a public debate indicates to members of Grand Lodge that there is a view amongst members and amongst the public that a change would be helpful, then perhaps that might contribute to an earlier change of the rule.
I think the important debate is within the Orange Order itself.
Right. And Brian, you're saying the opposite effect.
Absolutely. Yes.
So by appearing on this programme tonight saying you think there should be change, you're actually diminishing the chance of change.
Unfortunately, yes.
Really?
Yes.
The Orange Order is that contrary an organisation?
Well, yes.
That's a question, by the way.
Read the book. Yeah. Well, again, I mean, let's be honest. A survey was taken whether or not the Grand Lodge Orangemen should talk to the Parades Commission.
Yeah.
And overwhelmingly, the result of that was yes. But it was ignored because Grand Lodge officers didn't like it.
What about those individuals, of course, who feel very strongly that the rule should remain in place and should be properly implemented?
Yes,
well,
there is a
that has been raised.
Yeah.
That was raised at a time when Stephen Dickinson and others were involved in an organisation and what's called Orange Reformation.
Yes.
And that was the thrust of it.
That is a view. I don't know how widely held you think that view is, Danny.
Well, I think there is still a strong body of opinion within Orangeism who will hold that view.
Right.
But I think in practical terms, certainly in rural areas, the rule is generally is very often ignored or overlooked.
OK. Billy Logan, you've been in the Orange Order for a very long time.
Yes.
You said that yourself. There's not much that you haven't seen in the decades that you've been involved. What would you say to those individuals watching this programme tonight who think the rules should remain in place and ought to be sacrosanct? What's your message to them?
Well, they need to be a bit more open-minded about matters. And fair enough, this is a matter entirely for Grand Lodge, and I as an individual will not change it. But the senior officers of the institution will take the decision, whatever way that may be. But you know something? The members will do their own thing anyway.
That's right. Always have.
Well, it's a very interesting solution to what is quite a testy problem. Thank you all very much indeed.